live now. So if we are, welcome to Interactive Futures and the panel session discussing the challenges and opportunities facing the UK games industry in 2021 and beyond. We have some fascinating panelists to discuss this, and there will hopefully be time at the end to take a few questions. So please submit them during the discussion. The intros first. My name is Philip Oliver. I've been in the games industry from the early 80s together with my twin brother. We're quite often called the Oliver Twins, and we did a lot of very early games at Codemasters and helped we with Codemasters kind of grew up the region of Silicon Spire, as it's well known. We set up Blitz Games and produced an enormous number of games for all the consoles and PCs there. Beyond that, we set up Radiant Worlds, set up a big online game, and more recently we sold that to Rebellion, bringing Rebellion into the area. They now have over 100 people in the area, and we've now set up another company, Panavox, to create a new kind of entertainment. But enough about me. Let me introduce to you Liz Prince. Liz is business manager of Amicus, a specialist recruitment company for the games industry. She's been in recruitment since the early 90s, having previously worked in IT, and before that was a computer science grad. She worked in games for 16 years and is deeply committed to diversity and inclusion across the sector, and is playing her part with industry-wide initiative to ensure that women in particular know about and aspire to career paths available to them in the games industry. Liz is a regular contributor on industry and specialist education panels, working to help accelerate the diversity agenda, diversity inclusion agenda, with the ultimate goal of achieving a fully diverse workforce in games, and is a proud ambassador of special effects. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
Anna from the BFI. As head of certification, Anna works closely with key stakeholders in government and across screen sectors to provide advice and guidance on the application processes for all of the cultural tests, co-production treaties, and policies relating to all of the creative sector tax reliefs for film, high-end animation, television, children's television, and video games. Anna regularly speaks on panels at conferences and events to promote tax reliefs, such as the Children's Media Conference, at the Develop Games Conference, and many others. In addition, Anna has organised BFI-led seminars and events for animation, video games, and children's television sectors. Anna is a trustee of the video games industry charity, GamesAid. She is the GI Biz 100 Women's, she is in the GI Biz 100 Women for the UK games industry. She's an ambassador for Autista Play and video games arm of the charity Autistica, and a patron for Safe Our World, the video games industry mental health charity. She's a member of the Production Guild of Great Britain and Women in Film and TV. Fantastic CV there. Thank you very much. Anna, we look forward to hearing about that, especially the mental health. Jane, who are with us, is a creative director at Pixel Toys and has recently completed the development of Warhammer 40K, Battle Sister for Oculus VR platforms, released last December. Through 2019 into 2020, he was a Digital Fellow of the Royal Shakespeare Company and Magic Leap, researching the future of theatre and performance through spatial computing and XR, research which will be shared at GDC this year. His previous games include Drop Dead, Realm War, DJ Hero Series, and Dirt. Have we got Matthew?
No, we don't think we have.
I will save his introduction if he turns up. Since we ought to crack on with the debate and the issues, I want to start by discussing the current issues and challenges faced by the games industry because of COVID, lockdowns, remote working, recruitment, onboarding, and Brexit. But after that, and we won't spend too long on that, let's talk about the positives and the opportunities and the solutions that we have. So let's start with James. I'm going to hand it over to the panelists to discuss the issues.
Okay, great. Thanks, Philip. Yeah, so I think we'll come to me first, only because we've just finished Warhammer 40,000 Battle Sister just before Christmas, and we launched that in December. And that game we developed at Pixel Toys, mostly remotely, mostly during lockdown, and so obviously first-hand knowledge of some of the challenges that COVID has brought. So obviously, we probably have to go onto that straight away. And so yeah, so obviously the challenges that were big in terms of moving the entire team remotely. Obviously, a lot of the things are the things you would expect. So just physically getting everybody all their stuff to where they live, and the challenges of working particularly with large quantities of data over home internet, that kind of thing, the challenges of communicating as a team. And one thing I will say is that actually I think there's loads of real positives with that, as well as the negatives of not being in the same room as each other, which obviously there are loads of positives which I'm sure we'll come to as well. But it certainly, I think everybody, we use Slack for our main communication, and I think there's definitely some positives there with having this hub that everybody is feeding into during the day, and you know that everybody is communicating via that medium as well. And likewise Zoom, which I think is ubiquitous to everybody these days. So certainly,
or some of the other services.
All other services are available.
Indeed,
yes. Yeah, depending on.
And unfortunately, we have to learn how to master them all.
Yes, yeah, because you can guarantee that we'll have to sort of jump between all these different bits of software. So certainly that was one of our real challenges this year. I'm sure I'll go into more details as we talk, but I don't know if anyone else wants to sort of jump into any of that stuff.
Liz, Anna?
I think it's just been a huge learning curve, hasn't it, in an incredibly short time. I think when I reflect on what's less than a year ago, James, you're absolutely right, pivoting people from a technology perspective, but also I think the hearts and minds, when I think about the games industry 12, 18 months ago, it was actually really, really difficult to get anybody to talk openly and properly about remote working. And the options for that, especially when I'm talking about opening the talent pipeline to be as wide as possible. The idea of flexible working, perhaps not working normal office hours, all of that sort of stuff. It used to be a really big issue for the games industry, and obviously on a sixpence, we were all making it work, and getting to know this thing called Zoom that I don't know anybody who'd actually heard of it before last March. So
I agree with you. We're in technology, and none of us have been properly using video calls.
Yeah.
We have a doctor neighbour, and he actually said to me, and I think it's very true, that the lockdown has accelerated the switch to digital and home working, remote working, and everything, probably 5 years.
Absolutely.
It was probably going to happen, but accelerated it by about 5 years, and I think that's actually true. Anna, sorry, Liz.
Sorry, no, I was just on that point. Even to the point of things like the way that the high street was developing, and the way that the shopping habits were moving. And who wants to see shops closing on the high street? But the fact is that acceleration of online shopping and the way that we're buying things was already changing, and yet it's just moved us on so fast, hasn't it? Sorry, Anna.
Not at all. I think for us, going agile we were already in an agile working environment, but it was only sort of, we had a team of 10 when we started. We've now gone up to a team of 12. But one of us would do 1 day a week. Someone would be out at a physical conference doing talks, doing this kind of thing, but in person. So we only had less of a number of desks for the amount of people we had. So we already did agile working, but going full agile was quite tricky for us to begin with. We have all this, with all our applications across games, film and TV, you always have to have hard copies. And it was like, that was one of the most important things, making sure we had a workaround for that, because it's in government legislation. So that was the first thing we had a challenge with. But also it's quite hard for us to, we had to engage new staff while remotely as well. The interesting thing is, from obviously, say we cover games, film and TV. For film and TV, production completely stopped. But games and animation, there's been much more resilience. They can work, you know, we've seen those industries can adapt much more quickly to remote working and because of that, they've had, it's been a lot, I don't want to say easier, because there, as we said, there are challenges with remote working. But as a result of that, you know, it's balancing those different sectors. We've had to do a lot more to help film and TV get back into production with COVID safe production measures, emergency quarantine rules, etc. So it's been good to see that the games industry is thriving across the screen sector in that respect.
So before we actually turn to the positives and the opportunities from each of you, just one item each, what do you think have been the worst things about the lockdown and the COVID lockdown, effectively? One item each. Should we start with you, James, and then go around in the same order again?
Okay. I really want to say more than one. It's hard to not put it down to one. So I think, and I suspect this will be echoed with other people's as well, maybe, but obviously the mental health side of individuals, because this is people, and ultimately the games industry is made up of a huge number of incredibly creative people, and so the challenges of that are massive, and particularly for us in terms of development as well. I think having that separation between work and home just go away, and suddenly you've got the computer is in your house, and for some people who only have one room, it's literally next to their bed. And the challenge of being able to switch off and being able to step away from work and manage that work-life balance, and particularly when your work life, your life balance is not that exciting because of not being able to go anywhere and do anything, that's a real challenge. And so I think that would definitely be my number one, because it's about people particularly.
Liz?
I think the word that I used the most last year was uncertainty, and it absolutely echoes, or it actually underpins everything for me. I've written a few notes when I wrote the word uncertainty. It's about much greater worry than ever. I think that we've experienced worry for ourselves, our families, our jobs. Are we safe? Are we going to get out of this? What's our leadership doing? Not only for our sort of jobs, but actually at government level, is that working for me? Does my employer care about me? Do they care that I feel isolated? That the only thing that was certain for me, and obviously for all of us last year, was uncertainty. And I think for somebody who normally manages change, to have change thrust upon them in that way, I think was probably the most significant thing for me.
I definitely echo what James and Liz have said. I think the mental health side of it, it's not, it's either you're on your own and you're sitting on a sofa, or you've got a family and you've got a home school as well. And, at first there was that idea, it was the uncertainty. I felt a little bit scared at times, because it's like, well, what is this and what's going on? We've never had a pandemic in our lifetime. But also the idea that you end up, I don't miss the commute anymore, because
that's a benefit.
Well, I say I don't miss the commute, but when we were allowed to go into the office sort of in the summer when everything was relaxed a bit, I actually did enjoy the commute, because it broke up the day, and I didn't start, I meant to work from 9:45 till 6. I do lots of extra hours anyway. That's what's expected of me as the head of department. But you would get up and log on at 8 o'clock, and then at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, you're still on the computer. You haven't had a proper lunch break because you've worked through your lunch, and you've got Zoom fatigue or Microsoft Teams fatigue or Google Meets fatigue. And that was it. You just, there's no escape. And I miss the interaction. Yes, we can interact, and it's great that we have, and we'll talk about this in opportunities. You can have this interaction, but I miss actually seeing people and talking, You know, there was it was a lot easier to talk across the desk and say, oh, you know, check on a query, that kind of thing, and just have a breather where you step away. And when you go out at lunchtime as well, it was literally just to go out and have a bit of a walk, get some fresh air. It was a little bit easier in summer, but I think it was so intense to begin with because we were all adapting to how do we deal with this, that you were just so full on. We've now actually put in place in our company some protected hours where you are not allowed to set up meetings, and you have to make sure you have a break, etc. And as much as possible, we're trying to do it, but it's because you're trying to do COVID response and recovery, but you also need to look after your own recovery as well, which is why it's so important that, you know, mental health has been discussed, I think, across all industries, and it's really important that there are schemes in place and that we have those opportunities to talk, and we make sure we do talk to people and look after each other. I mean, I'm worried about my team as well, and new people starting, because you've hardly ever met them. But it's always like, I'm always trying to check in with them. It's like, is everyone okay? And it's like, okay, but are you okay, Anna, as well? And that's what's important as well. You know, and we have a good relationship. We're always looking after each other.
We have Matthew join us. Thank you, Anna. We have Matthew join us. Hi, Matthew. Sorry that you obviously couldn't get in. Let's just quickly do Matthew's introduction. He works for IWGB Game Workers. He's currently the elected treasurer of the Game Workers branch of the IWGB, the Independent Workers of Great Britain, the first trade union in the UK to specifically focus on defending the rights of workers in the UK games industry and helping them organise within the workspace. As a volunteer, Matthew balances his union work with a career in games spanning almost 20 years and puts the industry experience and knowledge to good use in supporting union members from across the UK games industry. Welcome, Matthew. We've just been talking about mental health. I know that's something that's quite close to your heart as well, making sure that everybody is being looked after correctly. Would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what's already been said, but at least from my perspective, we feel it's really important that employers pay attention to the mental health of their workers and just make sure that it's always possible for workers to talk to someone confidentially and in private if they need to about any sort of mental health problems affecting their day-to-day life at work. And most importantly, more importantly than anything, don't start forcing non-critical roles into the office. No matter how important it feels, if someone is apprehensive about traveling into work during the pandemic, listen to them and respect them. It's a duty of care as an employer.
Agreed. That's a good contribution. We are getting to that point now. I said that we flip it from the problems and the negatives that have been created to more the solutions and the opportunities and the positives that have actually come out of the lockdown and the COVID. And I haven't actually used the word Brexit yet either.
I was just going to say, Philip.
I'll throw that word in as well.
Got the B word out.
Got to go in there somewhere.
Just the C word.
So by all means, when you're speaking, you can drop that one in and actually say much effect regarding that as well, if you like. Who would like to kick off some of the solutions and the opportunities? James?
No,
sorry.
Liz sounds like she's got something. Go on, Liz. Go, Liz.
Go on, Liz.
I guess it's back to flexible working and the opportunity that's really going to bring for us. And I will say the Brexit word because I think it would be ridiculous to talk about 2021 without it. The impact of Brexit, certainly from a recruitment perspective, is that we now have I suppose a slight, we've got some hurdles in the way now that perhaps we definitely didn't have in 2020. So when we think about bringing people to work in the UK from the EU, obviously we can't now do that unless clients are sponsors or they find other ways of working with them. But I think that flexible working it's definitely going to open up more talent pipeline for the games industry, because people who otherwise may not have been attracted to the industry, and because perhaps either they couldn't work remotely or they couldn't just work at a different location, etc., are now going to be attracted to the industry. I think that last year has really altered people's priorities in the way they want to work. My notes to myself on this are people are definitely considering what they want from their employment, much more consideration of their home life, their families, their well-being, their location. And I think this kind of enforced flexible working experiment that we've all been doing together has actually truly shown businesses what can be achieved. So I think there is huge opportunity from what we've all just experienced. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that remote working or flexible working is for everybody. I definitely think there are those who want to work in a particular way. So I would hate it if companies made decisions that would blanket anything. I think my feeling about the way forward is hybrid everything, whether that's hybrid working, whether it's hybrid shopping, that sort of feeling of that mix of old and new, I think is makes sense for the way forward.
Yeah, I'll definitely sort of pick up on some of the things that Liz said there, which is, I think, for all the awfulness of COVID, which is horrific, and the disruption that's caused, there is that opportunity, I think, from when things are disrupted. So it is that hybrid working that Liz mentions there, and I think there are opportunities there to take the best from things, and also to avoid the things that we found don't work, and it's maybe highlighted areas that were bubbling under the surface before. And so with the communication, I think when we find that as we are doing communication remotely, we have to be more intentional about it, we do a lot of surveys at Pixel Toys to ask the employees how you're doing, what about this, how about that, and it's about that listening, which perhaps I'd say while we did it before, I think it's even more important now because people aren't there and you're not seeing people's faces day to day.
Well, video helps.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's the thing. You don't get that sort of body language and that people are giving off as you're in the space together. But I'd say in terms of also disruption, the games industry as well is at one of those points of change as well. Obviously, we've got the new hardware of things like PS5 and the new Xboxes come through. We've got things like VR as well. So Oculus had a fantastic year last Christmas with Oculus Quest 2. So there's these new markets and new interesting things going on. Apple possibly doing VR in the future. Yeah, really, really exciting things. And so I think with all that happening together, we'll see different ways of development as well, and different markets opening up, which I think are really exciting for the industry.
I completely agree. One thing I would say is that we're here at Interactive Futures, which was sort of in the Silicon Spa area, Warwick, Leamington, sort of Coventry, but it was actually difficult for people to sort of come and visit if you're not local. Whereas now, hopefully, some of the audience watching this are actually coming from a lot wider area, which is absolutely fantastic. They can join us. So hello and welcome. But that's happening at a company sort of working level, effectively, that if you lived in the Silicon Spa area, lots of employers, but there are certain regions of the country where you may be passionate about wanting to work in the games industry, you're just in the wrong part of the country. Hopefully, some of this remote working that Liz was talking about now makes this a possibility if you can't move. And there are lots of people who, for family reasons or whatever reasons, can't leave where they grew up, where they currently live, and this is absolutely fantastic.
Philip, I think it's almost one step beyond that. Actually, is that a Madness song? That it's actually people choosing to be in different places now because of some of the priorities that they've reassessed. So, forgive me, but if you wanted to live in Cornwall and work in the games industry, it was pretty slim pickings in terms of your employment. So, but now you could have that lifestyle genuinely and work in the games industry. wherever that be, potentially in the world, but certainly for the UK. So I think that's a massive plus.
I think
I agree.
Yeah, as Liz said at the beginning, when we start, it's about flexibility and adaptability, but it's about employers having a fair policy across the board. And I think before this happened and when we all had to go remote working, there was a bit of a trust issue that if someone's working at home, they're not doing full hour. And I think that employers have to be on board. We've proved that that's not the case and the work's getting done. But they can't be one size fits all. Some people might want to do some days in the office and some days at home. Some people will need to interact. Some people may be quite happy just to work remotely all the time and just do Zoom. And it's being adaptable to that and being considerate of what personal. I think there's a thing here now. There was something on Breakfast Telly this morning that come from the pandemic, people are being a lot kinder. And I think there's a lot of,
that'd be great.
I think that in terms of employers and HR departments, you need to be a lot more considerate about people's needs and their, what caring responsibilities they have, whether it's children or other vulnerable adults, and just being more open to these things.
I think it increases the skill of the line managers, so your sort of technical.
It certainly needs to.
Because before they could just kind of spin around their desk chair and kind of see everything, kind of deal with everybody. Now they've got to make a little bit more of an effort to gauge, really understand the issues that people have, and be flexible enough to work around that person's own situations, whether it's kids at home and homeschooling or crap internet or whatever, or
all of the above.
Those line managers need those skills and that additional empathy with their.
It's a lot more emotional intelligence, isn't there? Definitely.
Yeah.
A lot more required.
Agreed.
I know.
Don't forget, everybody, by the way, listening, please do pass your questions through, and we'll get to some of those in a minute. Sorry, Anna.
No, I was just going to say, from my own experience, when we were always in the office most of the time, I was very strict. At 6 o'clock, I make the team go home, unless they might be going to screening, meet a friend. So I'm only going, because I don't like them doing extra hours unless they need to. And I, when we run events and stuff, it's like, well, I need you to come and do some extra hours now. Can you come and help me out? But now it's because of the way we are. Sometimes they need to take a break and go for a run in the afternoon when it's not cold and wet and windy. Although some of them may still run. And then they may log it back in at 6 o'clock. And it's like, it's okay. You just adapt what works for you. Just as long as I know where you are, when you're on and off, and just what you need to do for your own well-being, just let us know.
Sure. I think Matthew, would you like to contribute at all to this?
Yeah, actually, I do have a point there. So while that's definitely a positive, there is we've noticed a bleed over from work-life balance. Really, that people's work-life balance has vanished essentially in a lot of cases, and it's very difficult to separate yourself from your work when you're in the same physical location. When it's time to go home. And
certainly, so that is where I was saying that it actually needs to be the sort of their managers that are much more sympathetic to this, much more understanding, and working out where those issues are and where those problems are, and managing the situation. Obviously, it's in the individual themselves, but they must have a very understanding manager who's actually trying to work with them to try to break that, and to ensure that that individual gets a better work-life balance, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's something that we've seen practically in place. Certainly that requirement for really active line management, and really the one-to-one is so critical. Having those one-to-ones with people where you just stop and you maybe don't even talk about the work so much. It's more about the people. That's what one-to-one should really be about.
Was kind of in the kitchen making coffee chat.
yeah, well, exactly, because it's not there. And I think one thing I wanted to pick up from I think Anna mentioned it earlier is about onboarding of new people as well. And as you've got new people coming in, and that's certainly something we found as a real challenge, and that's we set aside certain amounts of time to do onboarding, and we did boost that up, the amount that we thought we were going to do, and we probably needed double the amount of time that we boosted it up from as well, just because all of that stuff that particularly more junior members of a team, graduates coming in, joining you, all the stuff they pick up just from seeing each other's working patterns and seeing each other's desks just isn't there. And those coffee, sitting there having a coffee moments, you pick up so much from that. And that's definitely, I think that's an area we need to keep looking at continually and refining. And we've already put up new communication boards, which we'd never used to have before, about so people can just ask any stupid question, because there's always a couple of ones which are like really like the question you don't want to ask on the big board with everybody else, but actually it's like, how do you find X, Y, Z, etc. So yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, one thing that is very good about the games industry is that financially, generally, not everywhere, but generally across the board, the games industry has actually done quite well financially, which has actually meant, because we're in sort of digital space, that a lot of job vacancies have been opened. I noticed the Interactive Futures job board has actually sort of filled up quite a lot overnight. I added a couple on there, and I've just looked this morning, and there's about 20 different vacancies. Is it going to be harder for those new recruits because of the difficulty of doing the interviewing and the onboarding? Well, I mean, Liz, you're in recruitment. Are you seeing a different sort of pattern?
Certainly, again, this industry and all of us, I suppose, as human beings, have adapted so quickly, because at the very, very start, everything changed. Suddenly there was no look and feel of somebody. Decision making for new hires was taking a lot longer, because perhaps clients were sort of
just a bit nervous how this was going to
more and more people into the process, because if we get more people to interview, then that'll check them even more, sort of thing. And I think that definitely the how will they fit, what the culture, will they fit into our team? And we even did something on a very commercial setting, which was to say to someone, if you hire during COVID, but when you get back to the office, if that person then doesn't fit, then we'll still support that. Because frankly, I do think there will be some people who I mean, forgive me for saying it, but some people are very different in person than they are over video. So there is going to be a settling back in time, isn't there? When perhaps one meets one's new team members, and some of them
realise they're only 4 foot.
Oh well, no, that was something James said. I don't know how tall my team are. It's like
it's a very important thing for me. I need to know how tall everybody is.
How tall are you, James?
Put it on discrimination of short.
Not really. I don't really.
I'm fine with height. Heightism, no.
I think it's really. I mean, just to point out, just in terms of the opportunities there. I mean, it's so exciting how many jobs being advertised on the Interactive Future, and actually, that's something at the moment. And it's worth saying, Pixel Toys are hiring. Sorry, HR department. But actually, there's loads and loads of great opportunities, and I know that we get a lot of people at Interactive Futures who are just at the beginning of their career, and it's a really exciting time. And particularly, I think at the moment, the world can be feel a little bit hopeless at times with some of the things going on, and actually just seeing that positivity and seeing an industry that is growing, and particularly in this area as well, is really, really exciting. And
I think what I definitely should have moved on to faster was the fact that after that initial concern over how that happens, the games industry has hired huge hundreds and hundreds and hundreds just in the UK of people all the way through COVID, and people have grown their teams by significant amounts. One client I can think of has added a good 200 people to their team all the way through COVID. So this is absolutely happening, and the growth opportunities, because of the new tech, and frankly because our consumers are all sitting at home playing games, has meant enormous growth for the industry, and people should be really excited about that, definitely.
No, I mean, we have been lucky that we're one of our overall industry has actually financially benefited, even if individually lots of upheaval and obviously a lot of change. We do have, I think we should get to the questions now to see. We've got one from Harrison Snate. Did lockdown restrictions reveal any flaws in your pipelines or methods of collaborating? That's probably best for you to answer, James. Did it reveal any
yes,
flaws or in your pipelines or methods of collaborating?
I think I was really, really impressed when we first started about how fast we all got online. So actually our VPNs and all that kind of connecting to our servers. So credit to our IT department who did a fantastic job in very, very challenging circumstances. But actually that's home internet connections, and particularly when you've got so we run using Git and pushing and pulling large quantities of data, things like light maps and stuff like that, where you've potentially got gigs worth of data that you need to move up and down. That really showed the holes in difficulties in individual Wi-Fi's and connections and things like that. I think in terms of the collaboration, yeah, definitely. I think certainly some meetings, we found that some meetings work really well on Zoom, and actually some, particularly when you're presenting something with a shared presentation, actually possibly work better than they do when you're in a meeting room. And then there are certain brainstorming type or those creative meetings where you're really sort of firing off each other ideas. I'd say probably more of a challenge. And we did have at one point when we came back into the office for a very short time, a group of us were doing some thinking about some future ideas, and just being in the room together, it felt like we made more progress there because we were in the room together. So I do think there's positives and negatives. I know that's kind of the theme of the talk today, but
Sure. Got another question from Harriet Frayling. Has lockdown and the changes to working improved how you look at reasonable adjustment and support for disabled employees and applicants? Who would like to take that one?
I don't know from an employer perspective specifically. I don't know if James has any experience, but definitely accessibility generally has improved hugely in the talent pipeline. Just again, I know we've touched on it just slightly, but the fact that people can work from their base, their location, rather than having to travel into XYZ is the first thing. But yeah, in terms of generating accessibility and opportunity for more people to come into the industry, I would say definitely. Anna, you were?
Yeah, no, I mean, the BFI is a disability confident employer anyway, and we're very good at our working practices in terms of minimum criteria for BAME applicants, disabled applicants. And I was really heartened actually when we did have to advertise in the middle of the pandemic, that we had so many applicants from BAME and disabled backgrounds. But equally, just across my team, and I don't want to specify if anyone has a disability, but I've always said, if you need any equipment at home, and it's been across the organisation, anything you need at home that we can get to you from the office, we'll make that available for you. So we've had, I'm looking into getting another monitor, chairs, specific chairs, because people can't sit on, well, I'm still on the sofa, but it's, back problems, all kinds of issues. So I think it's another one of those areas where it actually shows you that all the things that are possible, and that actually that's positive.
So do you think it's actually improved the situation for disabled and the BAME?
I would hope so, yeah. I hope people then take that on board.
I was going to say, Anna, I think a lot of this is down to the need for changing policy as well within areas, because it's possible that when you were expecting everyone to be in the office, that you had an office-based policy around making reasonable adjustments on what you could and couldn't do. When someone's in their own home, if you are willing and have the financial ability to be able to offer these things, then there shouldn't be a limit to the reasonable adjustments that you're able to make potentially. So I do think it should open it up. It's getting, again, it's all part of this change that, you know, it probably wasn't something that was forefront of the mind, but now that we're managing our situation, we're ahead of our situation, perhaps rather than it engulfing us, employers should be able to work their way through that sort of thing much more carefully.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Matthew, you wanted to add something?
I think it depends a little bit on the disability. Obviously, for physical disabilities, it can be quite beneficial, but for neurodivergent individuals, particularly video conferencing can be a huge issue for them and a problem. It can introduce more problems than it solves working from home. So it's important to remember that and to
and Matthew, I think that's absolutely spot on. And whilst we're forced to be at home, I definitely understand that. But I think this idea of a hybrid, you know, I think when we talked the other day, I said to you that the organisation that my niece works for has gone completely remote. They've shut their office. That's it. They're not working in the office. I think that's the wrong way to go, because of all of our individual challenges. Definitely.
We've got time for just one more question because we've only got a couple of minutes left. This one's from Damien Van Sitters. Is the office still necessary? Studios, Ori and the Blind Forest, they work from all around the world. I want to follow this after the pandemic. I have to say, I want to answer this one. We've just started a new studio, Panafox, and we're entirely remote, and we will continue that maybe forever. Certainly, we're not looking to actually get an office in the future, and we're not planning that. But everybody else, what do you think? I mean, in some ways, Liz, you were just saying about the hybrid.
And that's because for some people will be totally attracted to your model and the way that you want to work and perhaps the way that you want to manage your team, and that will suit some people, but it won't suit everybody.
Completely.
And it may, for example, not suit people at more entry-level roles as well. So your ability to develop talent might be restricted in that way. Exactly to Matthew's point, that there will be underrepresented groups who potentially won't be able to engage with your organisation because of those that decision. But so do I think that the office is dead? No, absolutely not. Do I think it's going to be different? Absolutely, yes.
I believe the world needs a lot less commuting. I mean, okay with some commuting for the novelty of it, but I mean, certainly when I was doing a trip down to London or something for a meeting, I would knock out a whole day for a 2-hour meeting, which was
a huge expense.
And the cost and the pollution and everything else is crazy. So I'm personally very pleased that a lot of that is down. But I think just generally going into work 5 days is something I don't think the world needs anymore. I think going in for 2-3 days for most people, not everybody.
And I think it does change what the office is, because I think if you've just got a office which is just a room with nothing exciting about it, that's a bit different. But actually, game studios are often amazing creative spaces. And if you look at lots of the studios in Leamington and the studio we've got for Pixel Toys, it's a beautiful space. It's aesthetically
our old space.
It's our old space, and
you made it look so much nicer.
But it's a place that we want to be a creative place, and make games, and so and that's actually different to people's bedrooms. You may have an amazing bedroom, of course, but actually, if I think the having that space where people can come as well. So for all the reasons before, I think absolutely, I do think it can work as a completely remote model, as there are lots of studios already doing that.
Well, in fact, I believe that it's completing this week. The purchase of Codemasters by Electronic Arts is happening. And of course, Codemasters is probably the biggest employer here. But one of their teams they bought a couple of years ago was Slightly Mad Studios, co-located all around the world. And that's a company now that had that was one of the first companies I'd ever heard that actually embraced that and made it very successful. They got purchased by Codemasters, and now Codemasters in turn is being purchased by Electronic Arts. So it can be very successful, but it's not for everybody. And I think we do need to wrap this one up now. So I actually think now that I've started, I should sort of do the wrap up. I do believe that there have been lots of challenges. I do think that we in the games industry have dealt as well as we can, and we were fortunate. We're not in hospitality. There have been some industries that have just been ripped apart. We've done relatively well. We've adapted very well. We've expanded during the whole lockdown scenario, and hopefully we're now coming out of this with a lot of lessons learned and a lot more flexibility that can be sort of divulged and used for the future, for the benefit of all of the employees, for the industry, and for growing the industry. So thank you very much, my panelists, for joining me. To James, Liz, Anna, and Matthew, thank you very much. And I do hope the audience enjoyed our discussion. And if you're interested in the games industry, there are lots of other great talks at Interactive Futures. And obviously, look on all the companies' websites that you see represented in this area, but also across the whole of the UK, because, hey, remote working doesn't matter where you live these days. Thank you very much, everybody.